There was bound to be a victor in this era of survival shows, if there had been only one lone woman who bravely faced the Arctic's harsh conditions a century ago. The 23-year-old Ada Blackjack set off for an uninhabited island in the far north of Siberia in 1921. The little Inupiat lady had grudgingly agreed to serve as the expedition's cook and seamstress for a group of 4 men, and oddly enough a feline named Victoria. While on Wrangel Island for her 1-year employment sewing survival gear, Blackjack was promised that she would be fed and cared for without having to do the hard, daily labor of Arctic survival. Nearly 2 years later, when a rescue ship finally materialized, Victoria was the only survivor on the crew besides Blackjack. Blackjack earned the nickname the female Robinson Crusoe as a result. When the team set out, the timid tailor had no idea how to survive due to his severe fear of polar bears. Her married name is Blackjack, and she was born in 1898 in the remote Alaskan hamlet of Spruce Creek, close to the now-defunct Nome, in an area just north of the Arctic Circle. Blackjack was born into an Inupiat family, but she had little training in hunting or survival skills. She lost her father when she was 8 years old, but the Methodist missionaries who schooled her taught her the basics of housekeeping, sewing, and European cookery, in addition to enough English to study the Bible. They had 3 children when Ada wed local dog sled driver Jack Blackjack when she was 16 years old. While Ada was on the Seward Peninsula in 1921, Jack abandoned her, and 2 of the babies died, carrying her 5-year-old son Bennett on her back on many occasions when he was too exhausted to walk. The deserted young woman traveled the 40 miles back to Nome. Blackjack could not afford to provide Bennett the medical attention he needed while he was sick with tuberculosis and other ailments. After her divorce, she became financially ruined and decided to leave Bennett at an orphanage while she vowed to find a method to bring him back to her. Blackjack learned of an expedition to Wrangel Island, Alaska about this time. The purpose of the trip was to find an English-speaking native Alaskan fur garment seamstress. Vilhjalmur Stephenson, an amiable Arctic explorer, was the brains behind the operation, which was subsequently panned for being ill-conceived and displaying a healthy dose of haughtiness. Stephenson rallied a group of 4 young men: Alan Crawford, Lorne Knight, Fred Maurer, and Milton Galla, whose ages ranged from 19 to 28, by appealing to their renown as experienced explorers. Wrangel Island had never been of interest to the British, but Stephenson wanted it for the British Empire nevertheless. Stephenson selected the crew and funded the expedition, but he never went on an adventure. He then dispatched the naively unprepared party north, promising them 6 months' worth of provisions and vague promises of plentiful game in the Arctic to top them off until a ship could pick them up the next year. Blackjack had many reservations about embarking on a trip with only 4 men, particularly when she had been assured there would be many other indigenous Alaskans with her. Bennett would never be able to afford to return home from the odd sewing and cleaning jobs she was finding in Nome. The Wrangel Island expedition gave her a $50 monthly salary, a quantity completely foreign to her. With the 4-man crew and, of course, the ship's cat, Victoria, Blackjack boarded the Silver Wave on September 9, 1921, despite the fact that multiple other hired Inuit had withdrawn. Just like Stephenson had assured them, the land on Wrangel Island supplied food throughout their first year there. However, as summer drew to a close, food supplies diminished. With no indication of a ship in sight, the pack ice drew near. The team had no idea that the hired ship Teddy Bear had to turn around due to unbreakable ice. This was explained to them by the captain. The group had to face the fact that their meager supplies wouldn't be enough to withstand another year when the weather shifted. Their predicament had deteriorated significantly by the start of 1923. Knight had been very sick with untreated scurvy, and the rest of the party was about to starve to death. After making the difficult decision to leave Blackjack caring for the sick Knight, Crawford, Maurer, and Galla embarked on a foot journey over the ice to Siberia on January 28, 1923, in search of assistance. No one ever saw the 3 men again. Blackjack cared for Knight solo for the subsequent 6 months. According to the Los Angeles Times, in 1924, she fulfilled the roles of a doctor, nurse, companion, servant, huntswoman, and woodsman. The dying man's spiral into lunacy brought on by scurvy was also heavily borne by her. He frequently yelled at her for neglecting him, and her lack of concern. While tending to the gravely ill guy, Blackjack took over 4 men's tasks, including construction, hunting, and camp maintenance, as she revealed in her journal. Blackjack, instead of giving in to sadness, documented Knight's death on Galley's typewriter. Staying focused on being reunited with her son, she instead devoted herself to the mission of survival. She built a barrier out of wooden boxes to keep wild animals away from Knight's body because she didn't have the strength to bury him, but she did leave him lying on his bed in his sleeping bag. After that, Blackjack relocated her living quarters to the storage tent in an effort to get away from the smell. She hammered driftwood into the ground to support the battered walls and ceiling of the tent. She constructed a closet out of boxes and set it up at the entrance to keep her ammunition, glasses, and fuel. The most critical thing she did was hang a gun rack above her bed in case any polar bears came near the camp. For 8 months, Blackjack was on his own, trying to stay alive. She managed to teach herself how to shoot a gun, set traps, fix the tents, identify local plants, and protect herself from polar bears, despite never having fished or hunted before. She hunted birds and caught white foxes in her traps so that she could feed and clothe herself. In order to better observe distant polar bears, she constructed a platform above her shelter and used driftwood and stretched hides to make a skin boat. A storm had washed away the boat the crew had brought to the island in the first place. While outside the camp, she mastered the use of the expedition's photography equipment, the schooner. Donaldson finally came on the horizon on August 20th, 1923, to rescue the terribly reduced team, nearly 2 years after originally arriving on Wrangel Island. Nonetheless, Blackjack had progressed to the point where she could succeed solo. Fearing she would starve to death until she learned to shoot and trap, she sashayed out to greet her rescuers in a stunning reindeer parka that she had sewn herself, a triumphant grin spreading across her emaciated face. According to the Donaldson crew, Blackjack had mastered her environment so well that it seemed likely she could have lived there for another year. But they also admitted that being alone for so long would have been terrible. After a while, she and the cat, Victoria, made it back to Alaska, where Bennett, who was now 7 years old, and Blackjack were finally reunited. His tuberculosis was treated at a Seattle hospital with the money she received during her stay on Wrangel Island, which was less than what had been promised to her. Following the devastating news of the expedition's demise, Blackjack was thrust into the limelight, hero worshipped for her strength and determination. On the other hand, the modest seamstress was protective of her kid and refused to accept any of the accolades or recognition, claiming instead that she was just a mother. They moved back to Alaska after she remarried and had a kid named Billy. Despite being at a disadvantage, Blackjack persisted in fighting Stephenson and her rescuers' efforts to use her story for their own gain. Although she did receive some compensation from the novels published about her, Blackjack never reaped any benefits from her struggle beyond her expedition salary and a small amount from the furs she trapped on Wrangel. Blackjack did not share in the financial windfall that Stephenson and others enjoyed as a result of the publicity surrounding the doomed mission. Stephenson went so far as to launch an attack on her character, accusing her of being heartless in her rejection of Lorne Knight's care. The fact that Knight gave Blackjack his priceless Bible, which she subsequently sought to restore to his family, disputes these assertions. While he was sick, Knight frequently asked her to read him passages from the Bible. Because her story moved Knight's family so much, they gave Blackjack permission to keep the Bible. She continued to use it until her death in 1983. Despite her relative oblivion, Ada Blackjack is rightfully acknowledged as one of the most courageous Arctic explorers of all time for her uplifting tale of resilience and perseverance.